patients have Alzheimer's and dementia, and I'm doing my PhD on this subject. This is Anne and Dick Barton. They are members of the committee in the Gibraltar Alzheimer's and Dementia Society. And together, hopefully, we will spend the next half hour or so sharing some information and spreading awareness on dementia. So I had read recently that in the world of nature, there are different types of tides. There's one type which rises dramatically, and there are gigantic waves in the sea, the cliffs tremble, and the water sprays everywhere. And then there's another kind of tide which rises quietly. It creeps forward through miles of sand and mud, and even though its advances are unnoticed, it is persistent and powerful. And the tide of dementia is like this second, quiet kind of tide. For many years now, its prevalence has been rising, and it is expected to rise for many years to come. Basically, I'm sure many of you must know someone who has Alzheimer's or another form of dementia. The World Health Organization has actually recorded that in 2015, the number of patients with dementia worldwide is an astounding 47.47 million people. And this is expected to rise to 75.63 million people by the year 2030. Dementia is primarily a feature in industrialized countries where there has been a shift in the population profile so that huge changes have gone through to bring a greater proportion of people to the older age range. And this is expected to continue in low and middle income countries, and where there is expected to be a rise in the elderly population and therefore a boost in the number of people who have dementia. So just to emphasize, the increase of patients with dementia is expected to be twofold in Europe in the year 2050, and more than twofold in North America, threefold in Asia, and fourfold in Latin America and Africa. So what is dementia? Dementia is basically a series of symptoms that include memory loss, difficulty in thinking, problem solving, and language. It is an umbrella term that includes, which includes illnesses such as Alzheimer's disease, vascular dementia, Parkinson's disease, and others. Dementia is progressive, so the structure and the chemistry of the brain basically have increasing damage over time. A person's ability to understand, communicate, reason, and remember also decline over time. So very often what happens with patients who have dementia is that they lose their short-term memory, but their long-term memory is quite clear. So this can be compared almost to a tree trunk, where you have the outer rings that are recently developed, and when related to a patient with dementia, this could be like what they did that day, what they ate for lunch yesterday, or who they met. These are things that they forget quickly. But the core of the tree trunk still remains very strong. And for a patient with dementia, this core is their childhood, their upbringing, their parents, their first language, the skills that they learned when they were a child, like if they learned how to play the piano. These are features that they remember so clearly that sometimes they almost mistake that for their reality or their current situation. So there are times where I've come across patients who have dementia who are perhaps in their 80s or 90s, and they they truly believe that they are children who are waiting for their parents to come and collect them, because these memories are so clear in their head. So each person's personal history is different. And that's why when treating a patient with dementia, the best approach would be a person-centered approach. Each person's culture, their gender, their beliefs, outlook, their values, their tastes, interests, commitments, they're all so profoundly different that if you use one generic model for everyone, that won't suffice. That means that a greater understanding is needed to effectively treat the patient. When dealing with someone who is vulnerable, it is common that the person may become devalued or lose their sense of self. And that's why when dealing with patients who have dementia or Alzheimer's, it's very important to share that love and patience and compassion. In an attempt to show people how it might feel to have dementia, this group of people in Madrid did an experiment. So basically, one of the people approached a random person on the street and sort of pretended as if they knew them. So they would approach a random person and say, "Hi, how are you? How's it going? Where have you been?" And of course, the person who had been approached was a bit taken aback because they were a bit confused and overwhelmed as to why the stranger was coming up to them. But this was done as an exercise sort of just to give you a glimpse of what it might feel like to be in that position of someone who has dementia, who is unable to recognize someone who's talking to them so enthusiastically, and give you a deeper understanding of how it may feel to have this illness. So before I pass you on to Dick and Anne, I just wanted to explain briefly about how the brain works. So the brain has neurons, and the neurons basically send messages. One neuron sends a message to the other via synapses or connections. And basically the brain is designed so that these neurons form circuits. The circuits enable us to function and to carry out our daily activities. When we learn something new, the circuits are continuously changing. For a person with dementia, they experience loss of some of their neurons and their synaptic connections. So evidence has shown that if we continue learning and we're well educated, we sort of have a protective feature over these circuits, and we can protect ourselves to an extent from Alzheimer's or dementia. So a lot of what we do in our everyday life, such as when we drive somewhere, we do it automatically. When we get ready in the morning, when we're cooking, all of this is part of our routine, and we don't really use our thought process when we do it. So it is suggested that we start using our brains a little bit more and keep them a bit more active when we do these normal daily activities. So when you're driving, perhaps take a different route, and then maybe your brain will have to think about where you're going, or learn a new language, or even if you brush your teeth with your right hand, try brushing it with your left hand. So then your brain has to just do a little bit more work, and hopefully this will help us in the future. And now I will pass you on to Dick and Anne, who will tell you more about the society and their history.
Well, good evening for us. First time I've ever done a talk sitting on a cushion with no shoes on. Not that I'm too used to giving talks these days. I thought first of all I'd just give you a bit of background, a very quick background on Anne and I, and where we came from to be in the line of looking after people with dementia, or attempting to make things better for people with dementia. Can you hear me at the back? Yes. That's fine. I started off sort of in Gibraltar after the war. I came back for about 5 years, then left with my parents later on, and never really came back to Gibraltar, so I'm actually Gibraltarian by birth. And we're back now, been here for 8 years. I spent an awful lot of time in the forces, and during that time, Anne and I travelled the world, etc., etc. At the end of, or close to the end of my time in the forces, Anne, who by that time was a psychiatric nurse working for the NHS, was coming home at night feeling very disgruntled about the standards of care that she was experiencing in the various establishments where she worked. Being as I was a soldier, I used to move on about every 3 years to somewhere new. Anne would come along with me and join yet another hospital and experience yet another set of standards for looking after people with dementia. And so one evening she came back home to me and said, "This is not good enough. I want to start my own care home." Well, being a soldier, that's not the thing I actually wanted to hear, as you can imagine. I retorted with, "Can't we start a dog's home or something I know something about?" But determined she was, and that's what we did. We started off with a very small home of 13 residents, which by that time I was still in the army, so Anne and our daughter Tina, who is also a registered nurse, started looking after our group, our residents. Over the years we grew a little. In the first 3 years we increased the size of the building, managed to double our residents, and we finished up with 29 residents at that stage again. Then later on, as we fortunately, by, I would love to say my forethought, but it wasn't, it was Anne's, we had the grounds to actually build another care home within our own grounds. And so we built a nursing home rather than a residential home. But after a few years we changed that back to residential, because the main care needed for people with dementia is personal care. If a person is ill, then they 9 times out of 10 disappear into hospital. So we concentrated on people who were in need of residential care. And so we finished up with a home with about 60 residents, 70 odd staff, Anne in charge, and me learning as I went along. As you do.
And a bit of a handyman occasionally.
And a bit of a hand, as you might imagine. So that's how we started. We kept the home for about 24 years or
22 years.
22 years. And when we started talking about retirement, we decided that we'd come to Gibraltar, or come back to Gibraltar. I mean, during the last 30, 40 years, we've been visiting relatives here, on and off, 1 week, 2 weeks at a time, during the year. But then we decided we'd come back. When we came back, we thought that we should possibly use some of our experience to assist with the Dementia, Alzheimer's Dementia Society, because obviously the people within Gibraltar generally, their experience of people with dementia is their own relative or person, somebody close to them, somebody they know that way. Whereas we obviously had a much wider view on the problems that beset people and their relatives, and how people react to having to look after people with dementia and the problems that go along with it. And so we thought we would come and join the society here and hopefully give help and develop with the society together, and which is what we did.
It is.
Would you like to take anything else from there?
No, that was pretty much where it was.
Okay, you want to?
No, you just keep on there.
I'm keeping on going.
He's always talked better than me.
You can see who whines. And right. Yeah. Well, so we looked around Gibraltar in our first year with the society. It wasn't actually called a society at all. It was called a support group. And that's basically what it did. It looked for people who would come to the society or the group and say, "Look, I'm having problems, can you help in any way?" Which was fine in its own way, but people in Gibraltar, you will know better than I, you don't do that. You're a very tight-knit family group, and people who have somebody within their care look after them generally, and they don't go out looking for assistance anywhere else unless they know that assistance is going to be there. So where do you go? You then have to advertise how you can assist people. But it's very difficult to get that word across. And even in the time now that we've been here, where we've widened our knowledge of the people who have relatives within the community, there are still, we know, people that are just hidden away in the community. The average percentage of people in any community is about 3% of the community will suffer from one of the dementias that Sonal mentioned earlier on, which is a lot of people. That's about, when we arrived here, about 350 people we expected within the community. Well, that has grown because obviously the community has grown, although there's only 30,000 of indigenous Gibraltarians around the place, and obviously not all those are of age where dementia is going to affect them. But there are a lot of people who work in Gibraltar, live in Gibraltar, working, and they also have got relatives who they bring along and who also have contracted the disease. So our problem really at this stage of the game, we know some personalities and we can assist with some personalities in some ways, but there are a lot of people within the community that we don't know anything about at all. The only way we can get to know about people is if they head in the right direction of medical intervention, go to the memory clinic, start getting recognised for the problems that they're experiencing, and then from there we get to know where we can assist by liaison with the memory clinic and people working in the dementia, the daycare centre.
I think that a lot of people take too long to be picked up, even by the families, because the families just get used to looking after them. If they started earlier, if they approach the doctors soon, and I know that's hard. You know, there's some people here that I know will know that that's hard because the doctors don't always give the right sort of answers that you need. If they got into the system earlier, things would be easier for them. You know, they would get a lot more help. But a lot of people wait until they're almost desperate before they get help for their relatives, and that is very hard for them. You know, that really is a big impact. Not so much on the person with dementia, on the people that are looking after them. It's an enormous task. It's soul destroying because the person you know and love is before you, and you're losing them. Now, they're not losing in the same way, in that way. They can be quite happy a lot of the time, the people with dementia, or they can be cross or all sorts of things. But they don't have the realisation that they're losing anything. They just do as they do at that time, whatever way they are going. But the people that have to look after them, it is very, very difficult. There are some places now for people with dementia, but not nearly enough, and not always suitable because it's still in the general hospital on most of the care. It's not run by general nurses, but it is not the same as having a dementia care unit, which is what we shall be having soon, which will make a big difference to us.
Am I off again?
Do you want a microphone or are you?
No, thank you, no.
Okay.
Where do you go from here, really? Like I say, our problem really is to identify people within the community. And the only way we can do that is by advertising for small functions. Like the other day we had a tea party down at Latinos and just invited people, you know, bring whoever, come along in, there's tea and cakes and chat, basically. Because getting people together so that they can then talk with other people experiencing the same things as they are is a real boon to the mind and to the personality. People think they're totally on their own when they are caring for someone and they can't get the type of outside assistance which they need. The people in Gibraltar are slowly coming towards that knowledge that there are places where they can get assistance, and the assistance is slowly becoming available. And that's the problem that we have at the present time, that people are only slowly moving towards the assistance, and the assistance is only very slowly actually developing itself to be of assistance to people. At the moment, the only system that we have is if a person tries to get their relative, their person that they're looking after, to a doctor, to first of all to be recognised as to what the problem is. They have to then go through the memory clinic, so that whatever the memory clinic diagnosed has got to be recognised, and then from there there is very little that can be actually offered other than assistance looking after somebody who is outside the ability of the person who's caring for them to look after. And even to get carers in to do that within Gibraltar at the present time is still very difficult. We don't have a plethora of people who are skilled and available to look after people in that way. And so at the moment we are in this sort of hiatus. Everybody, I think, in the right positions now knows what the problem is within Gibraltar, but yet it's not quite yet developed that it can provide the assistance which is actually becoming more and more urgent. As I'm quite sure a lot of you will know, that within the hospitals in Gibraltar there are people in wards who should not be in wards because they have dementia, and they're not in a dementia ward. They're not being, although they are being cared for by people who are beginning to understand dementia. Their main person who looks after them is a nurse. That nurse is not trained to look after dementia. They're trained to look after a patient with whatever medical or clinical problem the person has. Montalvania has now become 2 floors of it is just about dementia. Whereas before it was an elderly care home.
There was a new facility, isn't there?
John Blackco Wing, which has only been developed recently and is in beautiful, beautiful condition. And the people there come into the job fully trained, fully knowing what they're doing, wonderful, but full. And you know, there's very little movement or ability for people to move into the place. We have a care home, 52 bedded, which is due to come online shortly this year. That will ease the situation tremendously, but yet there's no scheduled date for it to actually open. And within that 52 beds, if I remember rightly, there are 8 respite beds, which is something which this community really, really needs. If a person is looking after somebody 24 hours a day, and quite often when you're looking after somebody with dementia, it turns into a 24-hour-a-day thing, because they want to be awake when you want to be asleep. It just seems to sort of work out that way. And so people become ragged very easily, and they need to have some kind of respite. So the person who is with dementia is offered a place in the hospital where they're looked after for a week or 2 weeks, so that the person who was looking after them can have some rest, and it's essential. Well, there's 8 beds, I think, designated for that purpose, and the other, whatever that is, 44, something, yeah, must be 44 beds will then be filled up with people who probably in the hospital now, I would have thought, as soon as that opens, so that they can release the hospital wards back to what they should be doing. And that, I think, is the situation.
And the day centre now as well. I've heard
Yeah.
three, but
Well, the day centre is a different kettle of fish. The day centre will also give this great opportunity for people to have respite during the day. It's designed so that a person visits the centre, and we've figured it out at about 90, full capacity. It would take about 90 people a week.
there are 3 floors that for the
For the activities.
Yes, and there's 30 on each, and they go from at the bottom floor would be the people most dependent, and it works up in that way. And they'll have different sorts of activities, but also we hope that there will be a chance for different things coming in, like a hairdresser maybe, and maybe we hope eventually a doctor be on site, but whether that will happen very quickly we don't know. But it will. The different levels all need very different sorts of help and care. People at the top level will still maybe be able to use a computer if they've used a computer, if they're shown how to do it, and watch with it. And but the people at the bottom are going to be the most disabled.
Does the society receive government funding?
I'm sorry?
So, I was just wondering whether the society receives government
No, it
funding.
doesn't.
No.
No.
No, not
So-
at all.
What it receives is people funding, and let me tell you that people funding in Gibraltar, I've never seen it as good anywhere else in the world. It's amazing. You know, every Friday there's a flag day somewhere. Somebody's got a flag day, and everybody just pops up, puts a pound in, wherever it is, and it's tremendous. It's absolutely tremendous. Our problem at the present time, our society, is how to spend the money. We have money. We have raised money specifically for the daycare centre, so that some of the equipments, which were going to be gradually sort of brought in and gradually introduced into it, rather than do that, they've designed each floor to have the equipment, and our society is buying those equipments. And some furniture and some other bits and pieces. This was planned about sort of 3 years ago, and we put it out to individuals and to businesses within Gibraltar, and their response has been tremendous, absolutely tremendous. We set a figure which we thought was very high, and we've surpassed that, and we have the money, but we don't at the present time yet have the ability to spend it. Another thing which we could do sometime later is to buy a minibus of some sort. Obviously it'll have to be designed and built so it fits our the client group, as they call it.
It'll be very similar to for a minibus for people with learning disabilities.
Yeah.
They need space, so you can't. And there will be some people that need wheelchair access.
Because getting people to the daycare centre, which is the old naval hospital, is up a hill or down a hill, depending on where you are. But it's a hill, whichever way you look at it. And you can't actually schedule people to be on time and put them on public transport, because public transport moves on time, but people with dementia don't. Getting somebody to a bus stop or onto a bus at a specific time to be at a meeting which is already preordained is almost impossible, because the person with dementia suddenly decides that they don't want to go, or they want to do something else at that time, or whatever.
But the logistics of that haven't actually been sorted out properly
So
yet.
hopefully
We don't know exactly what's going to happen.
we'll be able to spend some money on having that facility. How we're going to drive it around yet is still a bit of a question mark, how that's going to come about. There are ideas also of assisting people with mobility aids occasionally, wherever needed. And sometime in the future, when it all does pan out and the actual design that is that is there, the plan, strategic plan, I think it's called, isn't it?
Yeah, the National
When-
Dementia Strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sonal has the words, yeah. When the strategy actually is there and has worked out, then hopefully the society as such will be able to be more integrated with people who need help, and be able to intervene on occasions when they're not able to access the help which will be available within the community. I mean, like carers, for example, to get a carer to come to visit you at your home at the time, at any time, takes a lot of organising, a lot of arranging, and quite often it doesn't happen. Once you're allocated a carer, then that carer comes at the allocated time. But getting that in place is very, very difficult. Now, sometimes things happen where it's an emergency. You need to have a carer there now at this time, and hopefully we will be able to, at some stage, fix up a system where we have on hand people that we can call on to become a carer on a temporary basis for people within the community. So, I mean, these are all aspirations that we have, but as of yet, still working on. Our plan isn't called strategic; it's called hopeful, and we're hoping it'll work out. Any questions at all from anybody?
Can you just tell us some of the conditions? Like you were saying, sometimes they're in a wheelchair. I always thought it was to do with memory. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just want to know like how it progresses from like what it starts
Well, it
to
will
end.
progress no matter what stage your body's at. I mean, sometimes people are in wheelchairs already through some other reason, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes people just grow into situations where they need wheelchairs, and sometimes people fall over because people with dementia
That's quite common.
quite often
Really?
lose their sort of balance.
Really?
They get disorientated
Okay.
and they're more prone to having accidents.
You break
Wander
a
around.
hip when you're not elderly, when you're at a stage where you're not very
Well, you
fit.
don't have to be elderly.
No.
You can be
Well,
at any age to
No,
be
we are already. See, we're well classed as being elderly, but we don't consider ourselves as such.
No.
No, the official stamp's there, bang.
That's true.
But people do. I mean, they fall over, and once they fall over, you then have to get the person up and about and walking once you fix the hip. If it's a person with dementia, quite often that is very difficult because the person does not want to get up and start being bullied around and walking around the place,
It hurts.
and it hurts, and they object to it. But if you don't get a person up and assist them to walk, they never will again. It's just a fact of life. But if you do assist them, they generally do.
But some people, it's not that they don't want to do it, it's just that they're not being told to do it from up here. You know, some people will just want to stay in bed and they will want to just, they might want to be fed rather than, because they can't do it anymore. And that is not age related, that is mind related. You know, it depends on how far your dementia has gone.
Because they get very stubborn as well.
Sorry?
They get very stubborn.
Oh, well, yes.
Yeah.
Very stubborn.
Well, quite often, I mean, as a person progresses with dementia, that they don't understand what's going on, and it's not that they don't understand what you're saying. They don't understand what they're saying, and they know they don't understand what they're saying, and they know they grow frustrations because of the fact they can't get across what they want to say, what they're feeling. They can't explain it.
I guess accepting it as well is very hard for the person. Right?
Of course, in the early stages.
They don't. Sometimes they won't. They don't want to accept that it's actually happening to them.
Yeah.
No.
Depression is very common along with dementia, right?
Yeah. When we had our care homes, we only looked after people with moderate to severe dementia. Anybody who was in
Early stages.
we wouldn't take them in the house because they would recognise what was going to happen to them. And you know, I can think of nothing worse than having to walk into a place and think, that's going to be me. Yeah.
My neighbour went next to
Signs
my
of dementia.
Sorry?
What is the beginning signs?
Yes.
Oh, varied.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
The signs of.
Beginning signs.
I think that it takes sometimes a couple of years for families to realise that the person has dementia, because it might just be they're forgetting words, they're doing things not in the right order, they'll not put their clothes on properly, you know, they might just leave their socks off, you know, or stockings off, something that is not normal to them. You know, some people never wear stockings anyway, so that's okay. But if it's what's normal to them starts altering, that is when you see the signs. But that's a very hard thing for people who don't know about dementia to do.
Sometimes I wonder, but I'm 78.
Sorry?
I'm 78.
Yeah.
But there are times I go blank when I see a person, I can't remember their name.
Welcome to the
And
club.
we're in our 70s, exactly the same.
Welcome to the club. I hate it when people tell me their names now. All my life I've relied on Anne. Stand alongside Anne and say, who's that? And then all of a sudden
I've lost it.
all of a sudden she says, oh.
Sometimes I wonder.
You mentioned before that it's a progressive thing and that it's growing. Do they know why? The cause of why so
yes.
many people are getting dementia nowadays? Because
They
I didn't
older.
even know about this like 3 years ago, and now everybody or a lot of people around my circle and especially in this community has it.
There's two reasons.
Yeah,
One
two.
is it's age-related, and people are living longer. You know, 60, 70 years ago, you lived to 70, you've done it. You know, that was it. 3 score years and 10, you've done it. But now, you've got people that are 80, 90, and further.
As you get older,
Sorry?
I was saying, as you get older,
Yes.
the likelihood of dementia increases.
Yes.
So yeah, it's like proportional.
Yeah.
But and I hear a lot of cases of young people that are getting it.
There is.
And there's a lot of it, you know, and that's what I feel a little bit, you know.
Well,
There must be something causing it, so...
with early, there are different dementias. There's a number of different dementias, and early dementia is particularly, it's very difficult for the people themselves and very difficult for the families. And it's, no one knows exactly what causes dementia ever. That there's nothing that you can say, well, this is why this person's got dementia. Basically, if they start it, then it progresses and that's it. But for young people, it can be devastating because they can maybe lose their ability to walk, their ability to do things for themselves. They really, it's a very distressing disease.
And it's not related to not using your brain.
No.
Although people, as you said earlier on, if you encourage your brain to work differently and keep it ticking over, give it a problem, all that sort of stuff, it's obviously beneficial to it's beneficial to anybody to do that. It's like being fitness training.
Mental
you get up and do
stimulation
something.
is good, but
It
it's
is
not
better.
necessarily...
But if you think of the people that's had dementia in the world, Ronald Reagan, President of the United States, Harold Wilson, who was the Prime Minister of Britain, amongst two.
We had a lady with us,
Yeah.
if you remember,
Yeah, I do
and
indeed.
she was a world famous professor, and she had worked in India, in Britain, of course, and in various other countries around the world, and world famous. And they discovered she had dementia when she started when she was
Marking papers,
marking
exam papers.
for the university people, that she just was writing rubbish. And they didn't, she was so famous, they just, it took them about a year to believe that this was wrong. There's something wrong, you know, something's gone wrong here. It wasn't, she had dementia.
We had one lady who, at age 70, decided to walk across Australia, and did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she was. She was an ex-Rodine girl, if you know what that means.
Do you know Rodine? Do you know what Rodine is?
Rodine's a very famous girls' school in UK.
Very exclusive girls' school.
Very exclusive, and where people are strong young ladies when they come out, shall we say. And 70-year-old, she decided to walk across Australia, but she then developed dementia.
Not due to the water.
She carried on walking, yeah.
And also maybe to answer your question, you said why is it becoming more common? It's also because the awareness for dementia has increased substantially over the years, right? So whereas before people were so afraid of the stigma of having dementia or Alzheimer's, now everyone is trying to promote early diagnosis, and the society is doing a great job to support carers and tell them that they're not alone, and there are facilities coming up where they can hopefully have more help, and it's not the end of the world. Like, life doesn't end when you're diagnosed with dementia. There's still so much you can do.
It was very hidden before. It was. Families just kept them tucked away because they were ashamed.
I assume that people would also just say, oh, they're just old and senile, rather than actually getting a proper diagnosis. And
it used to be a fairly common thing, didn't it, to have an old aunt or an old uncle in an attic bedroom somewhere that used to feed him or her. Used to go and make sure that they were well, but that was it. Nobody ever saw them. It was just Aunt Mary's up in the room, and that was a common thing in British life anyway.
But they were
for years.
People got older, younger. We'd expect to have. We expect to have a much longer lifestyle.
And I'm starting to lose interest in everything. I have to read a lot. I can't read much because my eyesight is not that good. And I have to take so much interest in many things, and everything just bores me.
Do you live on your own?
Yeah. No, my son comes for lunch, but only in the night I'm alone. Daytime.
Have you thought of trying the listening books or the speaking books?
Yeah, but my son has got me everything on the earth. He's got me even a special painting book for elderly people, like to keep my brain working. Like today I was not going to come here. He insisted that I have to go out from the house. I'd rather be at home. You see? I'm getting more and more bored of things which I used to enjoy at one stage.
Is that because you do them alone? Do you think?
Could be, but I'm only alone in the night. I've got people coming. My son comes for lunch, he comes for breakfast. He's got a partner, so I can't tell him to come and stay with me. But I keep myself, I try to keep, my only thing is the television and my computer.
Yeah.
So what do you think that would make, improve my interest in other things that I used to do?
I think you need to meet other people. You need to meet more people and other people.
I can't hear you.
Meet more people.
Meet more people. I go. I'm a party animal. For coffee, that's the only thing I love. Anybody calls me, come on, I'm ready. Yeah, good for a trip, I'm ready. Yeah.
So when we have the next tea party down in Latinos, do please come down.
Yeah,
we have all the notices all over town. All over town, you'll see them.
Yeah. I feel embarrassed eating carrot cake by myself. I need somebody to be on there with me.
My son is a bit worried. He says, Mom, you have to keep yourself, occupied. So now I've started going to helping him in the shop.
Yeah, that's
So
good.
he insists that you're not staying at home, you're coming to help me in the shop.
I think that's not a bad thing.
I enjoyed it. I've gone only once, but I enjoyed it.
Yes. You should try again.
Yeah.
Do you guys have a website or do any online advertising in Gib or stuff like that?
There is a Facebook page,
There's a Facebook.
which is I've not brought any cards. See, forgetful.
What is it called?
Sorry?
Facebook?
Yeah.
It should be the Gibraltar Alzheimer's and Dementia
Sorry?
Society Facebook group, right?
Yes. Yeah.
It should be just that. If you like, I can pass it on to
Pass it on,
Shanti.
yeah.
Pass it on.
Especially for more
I don't
awareness
know
in
which
Gib.
is-
I mean,
you might like
everybody's
to
on
know.
Facebook nowadays.
Well,
You've
you've
really page and this and that. So
Yeah.
maybe when you're doing your tea parties and all
Yeah,
that stuff.
you've hit the nail on the head, really. I mean, awareness is the name of the game, and one of the projects that we're trying to get off the ground this year is what do they call it? The Friends, the Dementia Friends
Dementia Friends, yeah.
Society. Or
We
grouping.
want to go through the shops so that they are aware when someone comes in. You know, make all the people around Gibraltar aware of what dementia is. Not saying you have to look after someone or anything like that, but you do have to be aware of the needs of that person and watch out for what they're doing while they're with you. You know, and they'll probably be with someone else anyway. But just so that you know how to speak to them and what to offer and what not to offer. And, you know,
In the service industries, if you're in a cafe or restaurant or whatever, and you send a couple of members of staff to an awareness day or 2 days, so people actually talk about how people react with dementia, and so on the hope that they can recognise a person who's looking a little confused as to where they are, what they're doing at the time, and so they can step in and realise what is going on. Because that is the big danger. When people go for walkabout sometimes, nobody notices them at all. And what you need is a society that does notice things like that and is able to react. And you know, the end game really is to have everybody aware of that sort of problem within the community. But it's a big step to take. It's not been introduced yet. But I think this year you will hear a lot more about dementia-friendly meetings and awareness of it and certification.
yes, you can be certificated for it,
If that's
but
the
in
right
a
word.
nice way. But yes, it's
There's my mother's neighbour was a beautiful, elegant lady,
yes.
and she got dementia, and then you wouldn't recognise her now,
No.
skinny. Maybe she wouldn't recognise you, maybe she would, maybe she wouldn't, depends on the day. And now she's been sent up to the home because she had a carer living with her, but the carer couldn't manage after a while.
No.
They hired someone, the family hired someone to look after her all the time,
Yeah.
and now she's up there in Pennsylvania. It's very sad
Yeah.
to see that.
It's a sad disease.
It's really sad.
If anyone gets the chance to see the movie Still Alice, or if you've seen it already, it's incredible. Like, to explain dementia and Alzheimer's. Yeah, it's very sad.
I'd love to see it.
Read the book.
Did you see it?
I can't, I don't want to see
Elizabeth
it.
You can't
is
watch
missing.
No.
We read the book. Elizabeth is
Oh
missing.
no, I haven't.
It's very good.
Yeah.
The group, no, I just want to say that I checked out the name. It's Gibraltar Alzheimer's and Dementia Society on Facebook.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, I think just to finish up, it's important to note that dementia isn't someone else's problem or someone else's grandmother's problem. It's sort of our society's problem. So we should all be responsible and try to help our elderly wherever we can.
There's a number of countries in the world that are coping with it very much better than we are because they're more progressed with it, and they really engage with people with dementia, and it's amazing how that actually can help a lot. It really can. Being in a care home, if it's a good care home and you looked after well, people on the whole are really happy. Yeah. Not always. You have the odd one that's not.
And one last thought, and it's a thought which I have put personally to a number of people in the community, from your Chief Minister down, and I say it whenever possible. Gibraltar could be unique. You only have a capacity of so many people to live in Gibraltar. I know there's lots of people who sort of come and go out and all that sort of stuff, but eventually you only have a capacity, and if you cater for that capacity and get it right, you'll be the best place in the world where a person could have dementia, and there's no place like it yet. But you could do it here because you have a finite space, and you could do it. I'd love to see it.